What's up, sports fans? This is the Lucas Ross Sports Channel. It is time to give you my top 10 disappointing teams of the 2024 college football season. Yesterday, I gave you my top 10 surprise teams of 2024. If you have not seen that video, be sure to go back and check it out right here on my channel, as I gave you the top 10 surprise teams of 2024. Now we're doing the opposite. We're going to do the top 10 disappointing teams. And when I say disappointment for these 10 teams, I mean it. They were just really disappointing teams overall in the 2024 season. So how this video works, pretty much, these are based off of, my preseason expectations for these 10 teams. Some of these 10 teams, I had very high expectations for them, either making it to like the college football playoff or their conference championship. They did not live up to those expectations. And then you take a look at the other 10 teams, some of them I had them at least go into a bowl game, but not making it to the playoff or their conference championships. But it was very unfortunate that some of these teams did not make it to a bowl game this year. So let's go ahead and get right into it here with the top 10 disappointing teams of 2024. And we'll do the same thing as yesterday. We're going to start from the bottom and work our way to the top. So we'll count it down from number 10 and then go all the way to number 1. So we'll start here with number 10. That is the Kansas Jayhawks. Kansas comes in at number 10 here on this list. Last year they were 9-4. This year they go 5-7. Yeah, it's not really a big disappointment for Kansas, but, having them miss out on a bowl game this year, that's just really unlikely for Kansas. This is a program that looked like it was really heading in the right direction for the last couple years. I think they were already in the right direction, but this year it was just not their year. They had a very tough schedule this year. They had to play Illinois in the non-conference, and this was a preseason top 25 team. And, back into my offseason prediction on this team, I had this team probably going like 8-4 or maybe like 9-3. I had this team being like a top contender in the Big 12. And this is another team that I thought could make it to the Big 12 championship. So, yeah, just a very disappointing year here for the Jayhawks, again going 5-7. Now, to be fair, they started 1-6 and then they picked up, like 3 straight wins against top 25 teams. But it was still not enough to make it to a bowl game. They just had to beat Baylor. They got blown out in that game. So, yeah, they had to just beat Baylor in order to get to a bowl game. So, the Jayhawks are not going to a bowl game this year. They're number 10 here on this countdown, though, as a disappointing team. Number 9 is the Auburn Tigers. So, we go to the SEC now. Auburn went 6-7 last year. This year, they go 5-7. So, second year under Hugh Freeze did not really go as well as it expected here for Auburn. I was kind of expecting this team to turn things around after a little bit of an up and down season, but I did not expect them to miss out on a bowl game. Now, to be fair, Auburn defeated Texas A&M. They were just one more win away from making it to a bowl game against Alabama in the Iron Bowl, but they weren't really that competitive in that game. The defense I thought played pretty well, but the offense just really couldn't get past the Crimson Tide defense, and they just needed to win that game to at least get to 6 wins. But yeah, Auburn, did pick up, a few, good wins this year, but, they lost a lot of close games. Peyton Thorne obviously was really inconsistent in the first half of the year, but then he got better as the second half of the season went. This is an Auburn team that got better in the second half of the year, but it still was not enough here to get to a bowl game. So yeah, a disappointing year here for Auburn and her second-year head coach, Hugh Freeze. I don't think Hugh Freeze is on the hot seat yet. I mean, obviously, if next year is not going to go their way either, then yeah, you could probably consider him on the hot seat for 2026, but I think Auburn can turn it around next year. We'll see what it looks like. But, the future right now of Hugh Freeze is not looking off to a really good start here. So, Auburn here at number 9 on this list. Moving on to number 8, Arizona. Arizona last year was 10-3. This year they just go 4-8. Now, to be fair, it was a first-year head coach for Arizona. They lost Jed Fish, going to Washington and everything. And I think that really just killed the Wildcats' momentum heading into their first year in the Big 12. Again, they came over from the Pac-12 as a very red-hot team. In the month of January, they were one of the top contenders and possibly the favorite to win the Big 12, to be honest. But after Jed Fish left, this job and everything, that's where it really started to go downhill for Arizona. But this team still had a good amount of decent players, especially, maybe on the offensive side of the football. I thought the defense was going to be good, but it was the opposite of that. So Arizona, very disappointing season this year, going just 4-8. Not saying they can probably turn things around next year, but If they don't do that, then Arizona is not looking like a pretty bright future of a team heading into the Big 12. So Arizona here at number 8 on this list. Moving on to number 7, Maryland. Maryland comes in at number 7 here on this list. The Terrapins were 8-5 last year. This year they just go 4-8, and usually this is one of the more consistent programs in the Big Ten. You know, Maryland's usually right around there, like 6, 7, 8 wins, somewhere in that win range every single year. I think because of the schedule and, the newcomers coming over from the Big Ten, I think that's the reason why Maryland just really took a big drop. And they lost a lot of close games this year as well. And, Maryland doesn't really have like that exact roster talent compared to some of the top teams in the Big Ten. Again, their schedule was very tough this year. They really didn't have a big opportunity to get to a bowl game. So, yeah, for the Terrapins, it was a disappointing year, but, I had this team go into at least a bowl game. I thought they would get right there around 6, 7, 8 wins. I think I had this team going 7-5, actually, so I was way off there for Maryland. So, yeah, it was a tough schedule this year with no divisions in the Big Ten either, so I think that's the reason why Maryland took a big drop this year. So the Terrapins here at number 7. Moving on to number 6, we stay in the Big Ten. Northwestern. How about Northwestern going 8-5 last year and then taking a big drop here to go just 4-8? I did have some concerns about Northwestern's offense heading into the offseason, but, defensively, I thought that would be their strength. But the schedule was also very tough for the Wildcats. This is a team that you thought last year was heading in the right direction, but this year it was just not really their year. I think it was kind of like Maryland. The schedule was very tough for them, especially with no divisions in the Big Ten. And I feel like with Maryland and Northwestern, I just think the Big Ten is going to get really tougher here for both of these teams. Same thing with Purdue. Purdue obviously is not very good either. They're not on this list because I expected Purdue to be really not that good this year, and plus they just got rid of their head coach. So, yeah, Purdue, Northwestern, and Maryland. The Big Ten is going to be a lot tougher for them in the recent years, and it's going to be really tough for them to get to the Big Ten championship, in my opinion. But, yeah, Northwestern here, a very disappointing season after going 8-5 last year. And, this is also a team that was really worse than, a couple years ago. But this year, it was just really bad for them. So Northwestern here at number 6. Let's now move on to the top 5 here of the disappointing teams list. At number 5 is Kentucky. So Kentucky went 7-6 last year. This year, they go just 4-8. So as a Kentucky fan, it's really disappointing to see Kentucky on this list, but I got to be honest, Kentucky was definitely terrible this year. It's not really just about the roster for Kentucky, it's more about the schedule they played. They had a very tough conference schedule. Their non-conference schedule obviously is not very tough every year, except they do have to play Louisville in the non-conference, and they got blown out in that game. Kentucky beat Louisville for like 5 years in a row, but in that game they were just looking ahead to the future, and things are really getting worse for Kentucky. Let's start off here looking back to this year, though. You thought after the Georgia and Ole Miss games, they were very competitive against Georgia. They lost that game by 1 point. And then they got a bounce-back win over Ole Miss. And you thought after that Ole Miss game, Kentucky would definitely turn things around. But, it was just the opposite of that. Kentucky had a very tough schedule in the SEC. They had to play some of the top teams in the SEC. They had to play Texas, Tennessee, Ole Miss, and Georgia. And, some of those teams were definitely on the road. They had to play Florida as well. And, Florida ended up being a good team. So a very disappointing year for Kentucky. Brock Vandergrift just really could not provide anything for this Kentucky offense. And the offensive line, I think, was the biggest struggle for the Wildcats. So Kentucky, disappointing year for them. They're not going to a bowl game. This is the first time that Kentucky will miss out on a bowl game since like 2015. And they made it to a bowl game every single year since 2016. And things right now are getting worse for the future for Kentucky because they lost a lot of players in the transfer portal already. So yeah, Kentucky might not be really good next year. And as a Kentucky fan, it's really hard to say that. But Kentucky here at number 5 on this list. Moving on to number 4. Another team that was kind of disappointing this year, Wisconsin at number 4. Last year, this team went 7-6. This year, they go 5-7. So the Badgers are not even heading to a bowl game this year. Yeah, Wisconsin is a team that a lot of people were very high on. A lot of the people said that Wisconsin would definitely have a turnaround of a season, but it was the opposite of that. But you look at the schedule for Wisconsin, it was very tough this year. Having to play Alabama in the non-conference and then some of the top teams in the Big Ten. Yeah, it was just not a good year for Wisconsin. And, under Luke Fickell, it's not been a really good start. So, Wisconsin, Luke Fickell, is he the right guy for this job? I mean, I really don't know because, the Big Ten obviously is getting tougher and tougher with all these new teams coming over from the Pac-12. And you got Oregon, that's going to be just definitely the future of the, conference. And then Ohio State is still going to be really good. Penn State's still going to be really good as well. But, Wisconsin is just not right there with some of the top teams in the Big Ten like they used to be. And I think with just no divisions in this conference, like I said, with Maryland and Northwestern, maybe that's the reason why Wisconsin just had a very disappointing year as well. But yeah, Wisconsin here at number 4, they were very disappointing this year. They're number 4 here on this list. Moving on to number 3 now. That is Utah. Utah went 8-5 last year. This year they just go 5-7. And if you go back to my preseason prediction on this team, I had this team going to the Big 12 championship. Oklahoma State and Utah, which we'll get to the Cowboys in just a moment. Both of these teams were actually the favorites of mine to get to the Big 12 championship. I didn't really have Utah going to the college football playoff, though. I had Oklahoma State going to it. But, yeah, Utah had a lot of production coming back, a lot of talent on this roster, and this is just overall a really well-coached team. So to see them go at 5-7 is just very disappointing and very unlikely for Utah. But they had a lot of injuries. That's really what the main concern was for Utah. Cam Rising went down with the injury, and the quarterback position was once again not really good for them. And the overall offense was just not really good for them either. And you thought after the Oklahoma State win that Utah would go on to be like the favorites to win the Big 12. But no, it was the opposite of that. Utah just ended up not being really good this year. So Utah here at number 3. And speaking of Oklahoma State, they're at number 2 here on this list. Boy, what happened to Oklahoma State? This is a team that went to the Big 12 championship last year. This year they go 3-9. Did not win a single Big 12 Big 12 conference game. Yeah, they went winless in the Big 12. I did not expect Oklahoma State to go winless. You look at this roster, they had a really good amount of production coming back this year. You had Ollie Gordon, one of your top running backs, returning, and then Alan Bowman back at quarterback. Yeah, this team was really loaded with talent and really well coached by Mike Gundy. But yeah, Oklahoma State, it was the opposite of that. They go 3-9. This is a team that I had go into the college football playoff as well. So yeah, Utah and Oklahoma State were definitely two teams that were very terrible this year, and they were definitely the wrong predictions that we really predicted that they would go to a conference championship. And then for Oklahoma State, again, going to the college football playoff. These were absolutely terrible predictions, in my opinion. But again, what happened to Oklahoma State and Utah? Two teams that were favored in the Big 12. They have a very disappointing year. Utah goes 5-7, and then Oklahoma State did a lot worse. They go 3-9, and then winless here in this conference. So Oklahoma State here at number 2. But Oklahoma State's not the most disappointing team. I think you already figured out who the worst team was this year and the most disappointing team this year in 2024. And yes, that is the Florida State Seminoles. Florida State is the most disappointing team in all of college football this year of 2024. How about that record? 2-10 after going 13-1 last year and almost making the college football playoff. I think after that college football playoff, getting robbed out and everything, I feel like, Florida State just went downhill from there. They lost Jordan Travis, and they also lost a lot of key players they had from last year. And maybe that's the reason why Florida State had a very big step back. I knew this was going to be a step back year, but I didn't really expect it to be really worse than I thought. It really started, after starting like 0-2 with a couple of losses to Georgia Tech. That game, of course, in Ireland. They lost that game by a field goal. And then they lost to Boston College on Labor Day night. DJ, Uiagalelei came in as the quarterback transfer, and he just did not really live up to the expectations either. The passing game was horrible for Florida State. The offense just overall was very inconsistent. It was not the same offense that we saw from last year with Jordan Travis. And the defense, the defense showed flashes of being really good, but it just overall was not really a good team. And Florida State just really is a team that I had winning the conference championship and then also making the playoff. So that was a terrible prediction. Utah, Oklahoma State, and Florida State were three teams I had going to their conference championships, and they were definitely terrible predictions in my opinion. But yeah, Florida State, the most disappointing team in all of college football this year, and those are the top 10 disappointing teams of the 2024 college football season. Do you guys agree? Do you disagree? Let me know down in the comments below. Give me your disappointing teams down in the comments below as well. Thanks for watching this video, and stay tuned for more sports content videos on my Lucas Ross Sports YouTube channel.